Good day, everyone. My name is Cindy Ebbs. I'm one of the co-directors at Control Arms. Welcome to this virtual event today titled Exploring the Critical Role of Regional Actors in the Arms Trade Treaty. We're very pleased for you to join us today. First off, we wanted to say that Control Arms is grateful for the support of Germany, which allowed us to undertake this project. The project that we'll be launching today is a second piece of the final piece of our project. There were two publications regarding this project in terms of exploring the roles and the potential roles of regional actors in supporting universalization and the implementation of the ATT. The first publication was the Regional Actors Study, which was an in-depth look with just a few regional actors in all regions, looking at how they are supporting the ATT, what kinds of activities they're doing, and what kinds of work that they're doing that's either directly or indirectly supportive of ATT universalization and implementation. And the second and final output of this project is what we're launching here today, which is the ATT Regional Actors Handbook, much comprehensive, in-depth look that covers 27 regional actors and how their work supports the ATT universalization and implementation in a much more in-depth way. One of the other features of this document, as Raluca will speak about later, is it takes some of the regional instruments that regional organizations are doing that are indeed supportive of the ATT and also indicating synergies between these regional instruments, particularly on small arms and light weapons, and the ATT itself. So the purpose of this project is really to harness the efforts of these regional organizations that are indeed working to support the ATT in order to engage a little bit more in the ATT process itself and to strengthen the treaty and its object and purpose. And without further ado, I will turn it over to, today we will have opening remarks from Ambassador Thomas Göbel from Germany. He will begin, and then we will go into with remarks from our three panelists. I'll turn it over to you, Ambassador Göbel, because I do know that you have other commitments that you'll have to meet, and so you'll be joining us just for the first few moments as you give your remarks. And thanks again for taking your time to join us. Ambassador Göbel, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties. No, thank you very much, Cindy, for your introduction, and good afternoon to all the colleagues from a quite wintry Geneva when I'm looking outside. No, it's a great pleasure to be with you here this afternoon. So first, I would like to thank Control Arms for giving me the opportunity to address the audience of this meeting. And I would also like to commend Control Arms for all their work done to produce the Regional Actors Handbook. I think the project is very timely, so I only had a chance to rush through it so far. But perhaps if you allow me, I would just to share a few thoughts on the project as a whole and the benefit we hope to draw from. So I think we all have to use a kind of a regional lens, to understand better the individual challenges that regions and countries therein face every day, and be it during the process of accession to the ATT or later on in the implementation of the treaty. And I can assure you this is something which can certainly not be be done, which is not possible from an office or a desk in Geneva. It takes long-standing contacts and experiences from within the region, experiences which then have to be transformed into a set of information and recommendations that hopefully will enable us to base decisions on a better footing. So I'm convinced that the comprehensive presentation of the results of this study will help us. It will help us in our work for the ATT as we strive to seek a new approach to the treaty universalization. At the end of our presidency of the German presidency of the ATT during the CSP 8, we have let out that in our view, and also based on 1 year of experience as a presidency, that in our view a more targeted individual approach may be indeed necessary to coordinate efforts in the accession process, but also in the implementation of the treaty by countries who have just joined it. So we are completely aware that this is not a completely new approach. The role of regional organizations has been discussed from the very early days of the treaty, but in our view, it might be indeed need some additions and a sort of revitalization. And this is what Germany would like to achieve with our current work in the CSP 9. We are doing this in close coordination with the Korean presidency as still being a co-chair of the working group on treaty universalization. I'm convinced that this project, the Regional Actor project, will certainly support this work fundamentally. So I think we will be able. I'm looking forward to that. We will be able to extract important information from it to better understand regional differences and ultimately lay the ground for a network of cooperation. And then based on this, we can elevate our support to the next level, which means we will be able we will be in a position to offer much more tailor-made programs to those states in need. So I'm looking forward at the details of your work, which in my view cannot be overestimated. I think, this will be a very, very valuable contribution to our joint efforts for universalization and also the implementation of the treaty. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity to address this event, and I wish you all the best for the project and for the discussions today. And as we are coming to a close of the year, to all of you, happy Christmas and a good start in 2023. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Göbel, for joining us and for your introduction. I think you've certainly set the stage well for today, and we thank you for all of your work as president of the 8th Conference of States Parties to the ATT, and we look forward to continuing to working with you in your role as co-chair of the working group on universalization and in other aspects, hopefully as well. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Next up, I think we will be now introducing our our latest publication, Raluca Muresan, my co-director at Control Arms, has spearheaded this project, and she will be presenting the project to you, focusing mostly on the recommendations and findings and sort of the background on how we conducted this research and put together this resource. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Raluca Muresan. Thank you.
Apologies, I was also experiencing some technical difficulties. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides, but we see sort of can you push like the slideshow option if there is one?
I'm checking. I might ask actually Alex to help me with this, just in the interest of time. Alex, I just sent the presentation to you, and if you don't mind helping me. I was trying to be brave and use the different program to create this presentation, and it's not working as I had hoped. So Alex, if you don't mind giving me a hand, but I will get started because I have a lot of information to share, so I don't want to waste too much time. So the Regional Actors Project, which, as Cindy mentioned, we undertook with the generous support of Germany, and we're very grateful. It takes stock of the work of regional organizations to better understand how they contribute to ATT promotion, universalization, and implementation efforts. And also in order to identify opportunities for further engagement of these organizations in efforts to support the ATT. And so this guide, which my colleague Alex has already posted a link to, the handbook is intended as a guide for ATT state parties to better understand what type of assistance is available to them within their regions and subregions, but also to give a snapshot of the diversity of instruments, policies, tools, as well as activities that are developed and undertaken by various regional bodies, and which have a focus or a relevance to the ATT. I would like to take a few minutes to share the methodology that we applied to this project. So the handbook is a final project of a 2-year process, and which had 3 key phases. We began with an initial mapping of 60 regional organizations in order to better understand the broad landscape of regional and sub-regional organizations and their involvement in implementing the ATT, or in otherwise efforts to regulate the international arms trade. As part of this work, we looked at the regional organizations' membership, their relevant legal or political documents, defining their relationship with the arms trade or the ATT, general areas of work for the organizations, any relevant rules or regulations concerning the export, import, transit, and transshipment or diversion of arms, reporting requirements, and so on. Following this initial mapping, we identified 27 regional organizations which are actively involved in ATT implementation or rather other related arms trade regulations. And these include, of course—
Raluca, just 1 second. If you can tell Alex when to move the slides, that would be helpful. Sorry to interrupt. Thanks.
This is great. Thank you so much. And so these, among the 29 regional organizations are, of course, the UN Regional Centers for Disarmament in each region, as well as key regional integration organizations and law enforcement or customs organizations. Where possible, we conducted interviews with these organizations to better understand the range and depth of their work on ATT implementation. And based on this initial act, as Cindy mentioned, in October 2021, we presented an initial outcome document that I'm not going to spend too much time introducing because Cindy described it. And so this brings me to the resource that we're launching today, the handbook, which provides a more comprehensive mapping of the activities and efforts carried out by the 29 regional actors that were identified to conduct relevant work to ATT. And now I would like to take a few minutes to explain the layout of the handbook, so you to better help you navigate it. And Alex, if you can move the slides, that would be great. So the handbook has three main areas. The first one is the bulk of the handbook, which are the profiles of the 27 regional organizations, and these are organized in 5 geographic areas: Africa, the Americas, Asia and Oceania, Europe, and the Middle East. And each profile is comprised of 2 sections, and I've included the OS, from whom we're going to hear more about next, as a snapshot to see how one of the profiles looks like. But essentially, each profile includes a description of the organization, a list of members, as well as the status of their ATT universalization among these members. So you will see in this image, those who are highlighted in red are states parties to the ATT. And then you also have, for easy snapshot, percentages of ATT universalization among them. And then we also developed, the profiles also include information on regional instruments, both legally binding ones and political commitments, which were found to share links or complementarities with the ATT. And as well as, in some cases, featured boxes, which goes further into this analysis of linkages between the ATT and these instruments. The second part of the profile looks at the or provides an account of ATT-related activities, and these activities are further divided into direct ATT support and indirect ATT support. In terms of indirect ATT support, which we captured under the heading Establishing Transfer Controls, we wanted to highlight assistance provided by regional organizations in terms of the development of arms transfer control systems, to outline procedures and activities undertaken by regional organizations related to implementation of regional and sub-regional instruments that have a direct or indirect link to the ATT. And given the broad range of assistance covered in this subsection, these were organized into 4 types of activities: national control systems, legal or legislative assistance, diversion prevention, and gender-based violence. The second part of the handbook contains the general findings and recommendations for regional organizations, for ATT state parties, as well as for other stakeholders. These recommendations draw on research findings and take into account the different types of regional organizations that were profiled, as well as challenges they face in relations to promoting or supporting the universalization and implementation of the ATT. And they also highlight opportunities, both through which regional organizations can share their experience and expertise in support of the ATT, but also areas in which there's room for additional work that regional organizations could carry to support the treaty. And then the last section of the handbook is the annexes, and there are 3 annexes. The first provides a snapshot of the regional organization profiles. The second annex provides a survey of the regional instruments and agreements that were profiled. And the third includes a list of the regional organizations that were reviewed as part of the study, but were not selected for inclusion. And this section, I think, provides opportunities for additional engagement, for discussions with these regional organizations to see how and they can engage more in supporting ATT universalization and implementation. And now I want to take a little bit of time to share some of our key findings and recommendations. And Alex, if you could please change the slide. I think overall our research reinforced the idea that regional organizations are well placed to strengthen the implementation of the ATT, both directly through the provision of ATT assistance, but also indirectly through their ongoing work on related regional and international instruments. As I've mentioned earlier, of the 60 regional organizations that were reviewed, nearly half, so 27, were found to carry work that was either directly or indirectly relevant to the treaty. In terms of direct support, 18 of the 27 regional organizations have conducted some type of activity that's specific to the ATT. So this includes ATT awareness raising or universalization events, legislative assistance, capacity building initiatives, and so on. And you can find additional information about this in Annex 1 or a snapshot of who these regional organizations involved directly in ATT support are. In terms of indirect support, of the 27 regional organizations, 15 are responsible for the implementation of regional instruments that cover either small arms, firearms, or conventional arms. But we also found that many regional organizations are also involved in the implementation of the UN Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons. And because the UN POA and these regional instruments share linkages and complementarities with the ATT, the work that's being undertaken in this regard also supports ATT universalization and implementation. And for those who will read the profiles, you will see we tried to highlight how this is being done. And some of the activities that are considered to indirectly support the treaty's implementation include, for example, development and drafting of arms transfer regulations and guidelines, capacity building trainings in the areas of establishing national control systems, establishing transit and transshipment controls or preventing diversion, development of mechanisms for record keeping and reporting, and so on. Yet, despite of this tremendous amount of work that's being that takes place at the regional and sub-regional level, the rates of ATT universalization continue to remain low in certain regions. And I want to give you a few examples of UNRCPD undertakes a lot of work, both direct, indirect support of ATT and indirect. Similarly, REXA has been actively supporting the ATTs since the treaty's negotiations, and yet these regional organizations have limited ATT membership. 25% of UN member states supported by UNRCPD are party to the treaty, and 13% of REXA's members have joined the treaty. But similarly, regional organizations that enjoy higher rates of ATT universalization among their members, such as the Central American Integration Program, the Organization of American States, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, tend not to prioritize their ATT as part of their work. So therefore, we found that there's no correlation between specific regional activities related to ATT universalization and implementation, and ATT membership. However, the fundamental work that's being carried by regional organizations as outlined in the handbook remains a critical element to create opportunities and to foster cooperation and information exchange. And all of these efforts can help move the ATT universalization forward and can support states in implementing the ATT. So we cannot dismiss the important role that regional organizations play. And now I want to highlight which are some of the opportunities for engagement for regional organizations in support of the ATT. And I will start with areas where their support, where regional organizations can share their experience, their expertise, lessons learned, and good practices with the ATT community to further engagement. And Alex, if you don't mind switching the slide. One more, please. Perfect. And there are 4 areas that we focused specifically. One is legislative assistance, gender-based violence, both shipment, physical stockpile, and the acronym is escaping me, PSSM, and regional working groups. But I want to focus on 2 of them in particular. Legislative assistance, we found that a broad range of regional organizations have developed documents such as codes of conduct on arms transfers, model arms control bills, model legislation, and all of these can support the implementation of the ATT and related regional and international arms control instruments. For example, CARICOM Impact and the Pacific Islands Forum have utilized ATT model laws in implementation assistance that they provided to their member states. And these model codes or legislations can serve to strengthen the ability of member states to ratify and implement the ATT by providing an initial foundation onto which states can incorporate aspects of the ATT that are not already covered by their national legislation. The other area of work that I want to speak on briefly is gender and gender-based violence. 11 of the 27 profiled regional organizations have made some kind of progress towards gender and GBV, 2 aspects that are important to the ATT and the ATT communities, as we've seen following the recommendations, but that were adopted by the 5th Conference of State Parties. And I want to highlight some examples. REXA, SADC, and CTAC have adopted gender mainstreaming policies or are actively encouraging equal participation at all stages and levels of policy, program, and projects related to small arms or conventional arms. UNLREC, REXA, and CTAC are also making efforts to ensure that GBV is addressed in national arms control legislation and vice versa, that arms control is reflected in national legislations or regulations such as national action plans on the implementation of the Women, Peace, and Security Agenda. And then lastly, UNREC, UNRCPD, CARICOM, and REXA have initiated gender-responsive small arms control programs, while CTAC, OSCE, and UNRCPD have provided gender training to relevant stakeholders. And so there's a breadth of work in this area from which the ATT community can learn and can make progress towards the commitments that they made as part of CSP5. In terms of areas where regional organizations could strengthen their engagement with the ATT, we identified synergies, reporting, cross-regional support, and law enforcement And I will start with Synergies, which is a word we often hear as part of the disarmament and arms control community. But I believe there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to understand how synergies can be applied in practice and how can states benefit from these synergies. And regional organizations are well placed to foster a stronger understanding of synergies because of their responsibility to support the implementation of regional instruments, as well as international instruments such as the ATT and the UNPOA. And with this kind of valuable information that would come from trusted sources such as regional organizations, we can overcome general skepticism in relation to the ATT, for example, and common barriers to accession, such as political obstacles, capacity concerns, and reporting challenges and fatigue. And which brings me now to reporting, which is another area where regional organizations could focus their work more on going forward. Outside of the UN Regional Centers for Disarmament, only CARICOM Impacts, ECOWAS, ECA, and CTAC have provided capacity building and assistance to support states with reporting obligations. And this could be attributed perhaps to the fact that only 3 of the 19 regional instruments analyzed include reporting requirements on annual arms exports. And similarly, only 1 regional instrument requires members to submit reports on progress made towards its implementation. This is the EU Common Position. And so there's scope for additional work for regional organizations in this area. And by operationalizing the synergies between reporting obligations under the ATT, the UNPOA, UN register on which regional organizations work on, regional organizations could assist members to develop comprehensive approaches to data collection and reporting. As we know, and as you will see from looking in more depth at the profiles, regional organizations do carry a lot of work in terms of record keeping and data collection. So some of this experience can be applied to supporting states with reporting obligations and address some of the reporting fatigue that we see across instruments, not just in the case of ATT. In terms of cross-regional support, because I mentioned earlier that in some areas, despite tremendous effort from regional organizations to support the ATT, universalization rates remain low. We believe that there's opportunities for cross-regional support to promote the ATT and its implementation by providing assistance to regions, to organizations that have not perhaps been that active in support of the ATT, but there are opportunities to increase ATT membership. A vast majority of regional organizations already conduct work in partnership with each other, either through formal arrangements or informal arrangements, such as participating in each other's events. But this has been limited to activities. And what we are hoping is that this type of cross-regional support could be extended to include provision and exchange of substantive information. And I want to illustrate this point by mentioning that, for example, the CARICOM firearms roadmap, which includes a lot of references to the ATT, was developed based on the regional roadmap on combating illicit arms trafficking in the Western Balkans, and with support from CTAC. And so these types of opportunities to share knowledge and resources, good practices, specifically in regards to roadmaps and model legislations, can be easily adapted and employed by regional organizations in other regions where work on ATT universalization and implementation is needed. But the last area of work that I want to highlight is law enforcement. And this is one thing that we also realized in doing this work is that the specific type of regional organization impacts how they set priorities. But law enforcement law enforcement organizations were the ones where the linkages with the ATT and their work that are carrying out were not immediately apparent. However, these organizations can play a role in supporting the implementation of and compliance with key ATT provisions, including Article 11 on diversion, Article 6.1 on arms embargoes, or Article 7.1 are related to terrorism and transnational organized crime. Through their work on criminalizing and prosecuting violations of mandatory UN arms embargoes, through their work on intercepting arms transfers headed to transnational organized crime or terrorist groups that could be diverted to fuel war crimes or crimes against humanity. And so these organizations are well positioned to integrate the ATT into their strategic plans and to contribute more directly to the implementation of ATT provisions. And this brings me to the conclusion of my presentation, but I'm happy to answer additional questions during the Q&A and provide additional details. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Raluca, for that comprehensive and really interesting outline of this new publication, the Regional Actors Handbook. I think you've really highlighted some opportunities, not only for engagement with between and among regional organizations, but also thinking about at the international level and the national level. And it really seems like regional organizations, with the work that's already been conducted and the work that is continuing, can really provide a link between kind of the ATT international community and process and then the national groups as well. So this has really been outlined quite nicely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I want to now turn to our colleague from ECOWAS, Dr. Sani Adamu, and he's going to be sharing some insights with regard to ECOWAS and the ATT and the work that ECOWAS is doing. Dr. Sani Adamu works with the ECOWAS Commission in the Directorate of Peacekeeping and Regional Security and Disarmament, and he is an arms control expert with wide-ranging experiences in the fields of arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation in the ECOWAS region and beyond. Dr. Sani, I'd like to turn it over to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cindy. I would like to start by actually thanking Control Arms for associating with ECOWAS Commission in this very important launch. It's critical at this moment that we begin to also document in terms of experiences, in terms of also implementation efforts, by member states. So I would like to actually send greetings and also to commend Control Arms for this very important initiative. Having said this, I have a presentation. I wouldn't know whether, okay, Alexander, please, if you could project. I've been tasked by the organizers, and happily too, that I should share experiences of ECOWAS region, particularly looking at synergies and complementarities between the ECOWAS Convention as well as the ATT. A lot of colleagues, I think, on this call perhaps are aware of the ECOWAS's Convention on Small Arms and Light Weapons, which is a legally binding instrument in the region, which is actually since September 2009, it came into force. Next slide, please. These are the features of not only the convention, but also the ATT. The foundation is to be able to say that because of the consistency in the efforts in the ECOWAS region, since the entry into force of the ECOWAS Convention in September 2009, the coming of the ATT, when ATT came into force in December 2014, a lot of the efforts, that necessitated the need for the ECOWAS member states to actually participate, not only in terms of getting to ratify the ATT, but also to be active in the negotiation of the ATT process, to 2012, 2013. You all know the ECOWAS region came to the multilateral conference with the common voice to be able to see, the reflection of the interests of the region into the general discussions of the ATT during the multilateral conference. So these are the features of the two treaties, the ECOWAS Convention and the Arms Trade Treaty. They have a lot of provisions that are complementary. There are a lot of provisions that are also having synergies. So for us in the ECOWAS region, we are seeing the ATT as taking initial inspirations actually from the ECOWAS Convention. So I want to go to the next slide so that we'll attempt to see some of the critical components, that are giving us the ability to actually fully, implement the ATT seamlessly. As you can see from the general scope and application of the ATT and the convention, when you look at the objectives of the two instruments, they have complementarities in terms of what they seek to actually achieve. To the objective of seeing the implementation in terms of the transfers of conventional arms, as well as small arms and light weapons. The manufacture of small arms, as well as the operational mechanisms, within the ECOWAS Convention. The objective for the ATT, as you can see, a lot of colleagues are already aware, the exports, imports, transit, transshipments obligations, as well as brokering. These are all key specific, considerations which the two instruments actually put forward. And I'm happy to say here that on the continent of Africa, when you see from the regional economic communities, the 5 regs that we have, it's only the ECOWAS region that has actually fully, gotten the ratifications, of all our member states except one of the ATT. This is the belief that the two instruments, would reinforce each other. The two instruments will also support the general vision and mission of ECOWAS in terms of arms transfer processes and arms transfer regimes. So these are some of the imperatives. For instance, in Article 3 of the Convention, which is also somehow related to the Article 5 of the ATT, all the member states in the region are committed to, not importing arms and ammunition into the region without necessarily fulfilling some certain conditions. And this is one of the novelty that the ECOWAS Convention is putting forward, to the world, because there's no region around the world that is having this unique way of having member states to relinquish parts of their sovereignties to an international regional organization like we are having in ECOWAS region. So all member states consistently, if they are importing arms and ammunition, they send in the request through ECOWAS, and ECOWAS will consider, the request, the request must necessarily meet certain, basic conditions. And if these conditions are met, then the other 14 member states in the region will be informed. And by so doing, we are promoting transparency, we are promoting, exchange of information. So if in the event of any objection from any of the 14 member states, for instance, if Nigeria is importing, then the request will not be processed, but it will be taken to the Mediation and Security Council of ECOWAS, which is comprising ministers of security and ministers of defense in the region. So the two parties will be there and the adjudication will take place. The ATT is having a similar discretionary objectivity in bearing, the principles. If we are to consider establishing the national control system, which we are also importantly, helping member states to put in place processes towards, having which I will come to that later in the course of my presentation, is to have a control system. The national control list is a critical, component, in the implementation of the ATT. So the control list is not far away from the list of items that ECOWAS Commission is vetting whenever small arms and light weapons items are being imported into the region. So this is an important complement that the two instruments are having. Next slide, please. Alex, next slide. Yeah, thanks. The imports, transit, transshipment practices. These are also very important. I made mention of it, part of it previously, but I want to consider brokering here. Member states would need, based on Article 20 of the convention, they will need to have not only the citizens, that are engaged in brokering practices, but also companies. They will need to have authorization, clear authorizations on every bit of the transactions they are carrying out. In other words, if a particular company or a particular person is conducting, brokering activity, they will need to have clear authorizations, and they will also, member states will have to have, clear legislative provisions that would take care of infractions in the case of illicit brokering. And I can see Article 10 of the ATT also spelling out, some of these details. Next slide, please. In terms of record keeping and reporting, these are also critical, flagship provisions that we have in the two instruments. Reporting and record keeping, they go side by side. Article 9, 10, and 11 is obligating our member states to put in place, national databases, so that all elements of imports, exports, and transshipments would
I think we might have lost connection just for a moment. So let's just give it just a moment. We will try to reach out to Dr. Sani to see if he can get back on. And I think at this stage, we can, let me just see if Alex has any updates. And if not, I think we'll just move on to listen to our colleague Pierre DeLuca from OAS, and then we can jump back in to hear Dr. Sani's closing remarks once he's able to connect. Oh, here he is. Dr. Sani, sorry we lost you there for a moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Sorry, I had issues here, but I'm fine.
That's okay. No
Yeah.
problem. Thanks for rejoining. If you want to just wrap up with a couple minutes, and then I think we'll turn to Pier from OAS. Thanks so much.
Yes, please. So reporting.
Oh no. Okay, here, let's do that, and then maybe we'll give Dr. Sani another opportunity to finish up after you're finished with your presentation. So I'd like to turn over the webinar to Pierre DeLuca, who is a specialist of the Department of Public Security of the Organization of American States. She's been there in that role since 2015, and she's the program manager of the Program of Assistance for Control of Arms and Munitions, otherwise known as Pakam. Pakam is the umbrella initiative of the department to support efforts of the OAS member states in strengthening firearms control systems to reduce armed violence in the region. She's also a Brazilian lawyer with a master's in criminology. Thank you, Pierre, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Without further ado, I will turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Sydney, and good morning and good afternoon, depending where you are on the globe. It's a great pleasure to be here today and present on the work that the Organization of American States carry out on firearms control and how we support the ATT implementation in the Americas. So I wanted to thank Control Arms for the invitation and also congratulate the team of Control Arms on the great work of the Regional Actors Handbook. I'm sure it's going to be quite useful for us to continue guiding us on how we can support our member states. So briefly, I have a lot to talk, so I'm just going to try to show in a snapshot what's the work of the OAS and to start on the Inter-American conventions that relate to the ATT. First of all, we have CIFTA, which is our most known convention, and it has the highest level of membership in the region as well. CIFTA is our main framework to address the issue of small arms and light weapons illicit manufacturing and trafficking in the region. CIFTA also covers ammunition and explosives, so it's a little bit different from other conventions that we see in arms control. It is a legally binding agreement. It does not include conventional arms, since the issue of small arms and light weapons is the most concern of the Americas. And it was signed in 1997. It was the first regional agreement of its kind. It's actually the inspiration for the firearms protocol in the UN level. And it was ratified by 31 of the 34 active OAS member states. And 25 of them have also ratified the ATT, and 2 signatory countries have ratified the ATT. CIFTA has a lot of obligations that the countries are legally binding to comply with, but I just wanted to highlight those that are connected with the ATT. CIFTA mandates countries to create licensing systems to regulate the transfer of firearms, explosives, and ammunition. It also has a number of obligations in terms of improving border controls that include like record keeping, information sharing that connect with some articles of the ATT. CIFTA in the convention doesn't have an obligation for states to report, but the states have voluntarily agreed on a conference of state parties to establish a reporting system. So every 2 years, countries report on the effectiveness and implementation of CIFTA. We are currently reformulating this report template to make it a little bit more quantitative and more standardized to other reports. So countries, we will be able, and other operators will be able to assess and kind of classify the maturity of the institutional capacities to manage the life cycle of firearms and ammunition, including aspects of transfer controls. So that could be also quite helpful to guide how we can better support the implementation of the ATT in the region and identify the gaps. The other convention that we have in the Inter-American system is CTAC. CTAC deals precisely with conventional weapons acquisitions. It was signed in 1999 to complement the efforts at the global level, at the time, the UN ROCA. 17 OAS member states have ratified CTAC. And the main obligation of CTAC is to provide annual reports on imports and exports of conventional weapons, as well as acquisitions by national production, which is a little bit different from the ATT and UN ROCA. The report template of CTAC has the same 7 categories of conventional weapons. It doesn't include small arms and light weapons. And CTAC, the biggest limitation of the convention is the low level of reporting rates. So this year, countries got together in April on the second conference of state parties to CTAC to discuss the issue, and they have approved the creation of follow-up mechanisms similarly to SIFTA. We're going to have a technical secretariat for CTAC tasked with supporting the countries in submitting the reports. And there's also a consultative committee that will meet annually with points of contact from the state parties so they can discuss how they can improve the convention. And one of the things that they've discussed is the inclusion of small arms and light weapons and standardizing the reports to the ATT format. So by now, in the next years, assisting countries in reporting to CTAC, we will be more directly supporting countries in reporting to the ATT as well, considering the similarities. And besides that, the Department of Public Security of the Organization of American States, we also carry work operational support for countries to comply with SIFTA mainly, since this was the most active convention. And starting now, we will support with CTAC as well. In terms of SIFTA, the SIFTA state parties, with our support, they developed model legislation and they approved model legislation to make it easier for the countries to harmonize their domestic legislation to the standards and obligations of SIFTA. Out of the model laws and guidelines that were developed, I wanted to highlight the model law on strengthening controls at export points, the model law on measures to eliminate loss or diversion, the regulation for the control of the international movement of firearms, and broker regulations. All of those directly correspond to some articles of the ATT, and they can be a practical legislative tool to support countries in the revision of their own normative framework. They are available for all the countries. They are available in English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese, and we work also to support the countries in this legislative process. And mainly, we worked through Pakam, our program of assistance for control of arms and ammunition, to support countries in addressing the illicit proliferation and trafficking of firearms and ammunition. Pakam currently has funding from the European Union, and in the past 3 years, we supported 22 countries of Latin America and Caribbean in a number of capacities, including improving their capacities to manage the life cycle of firearms and ammunition. We provided training, material, technical assistance on marking, record keeping, physical security and stockpile management, and promotion of some regional coordination and information exchange tools. Through those activities, we provide indirect support to the implementation of the ATT, as Raluca had highlighted before, in terms of preventing diversion, strengthening transfer controls. And we also work to prevent armed violence through a specific lens on the community level, and including a regional component on prevention of gender-based violence. We'll develop some regional standards and training, which could also support the ATT's goal. And I wanted to highlight 2 or 3 specific activities of Pakam that we consider the most directly connect to the ATT implementation. Of course, legislative assistance. So we work with the countries directly to review their framework, to make recommendations, and then support them on drafting the new law or the amendments necessary and going through all the legislative process. When those countries are also state parties to the ATT, and even when they are not, we try to incorporate some of the obligations of the ATT to facilitate the ratification of the ATT. So in the past, we've worked with El Salvador, Jamaica, Panama, and Peru, for instance, on this model. We are also starting on this new phase with the European Union funding, the development of the Central American Firearms Roadmap that will mirror the good practices of the Western Balkans, ECOWAS, and the Caribbean Firearms Roadmap. And we are very confident that the ATT will be a large part of the roadmap and how we can support the implementation of it. And finally, we are developing a regional communication mechanism on illicit transfers of firearms and ammunition, the MCTA, as a secure communication channel for licensing authorities to direct communicate with each other about the transfers, any risks, make clarifications necessary, share information. And the MCTA would support implementing Article 9 of CIFTA. Article 9 of CIFTA is the one that mandates countries to have effective national licensing systems. And Article 9 also prohibits the countries that are state parties of authorizing shipment and transit of firearms, ammunition, and explosives if not all the involved countries in that transfer had issued the corresponding licenses or authorizations. So the MCTA will also work to support particularly Articles 7, 8, 11, and 12 of the ATT in terms of being an information sharing tool, promoting cooperation, and also work as record keeping of all those transactions in the region. In the framework of the MCTA, we did a regional survey in terms of transfer controls, and I wanted to highlight briefly some of the findings. At the national level, we saw that most of the countries do have licensing systems and have legislation to regulate the transfer of firearms and ammunition, but 52% of them are still using paper-based systems, which have a lot of limitations in terms of how we can use that data for policy purposes, how we can share data with other countries. And then also, most of them don't have efficient communication channels internally between licensing and customs authorities, which create vulnerabilities and gaps that can be exploited by illicit actors. And on the regional level, most of the participants identify the need to continue improving their tools to manage the international transfers. They mentioned as a big challenge the lack of standardization of the information share on the licenses, and also the absence of a regional tool for them to communicate in a very quick way immediately about the transfers. So as you can see, some of the findings indicate some gaps that are quite alarming. For instance, 82% of the countries do not communicate the others about denial of licenses, which could be used as an element on their risk analysis. 75% of the countries do not communicate the other countries when they have revoked licenses that were previously granted. So those licenses, in theory, could be exploited by illicit actors. And almost 50% of the countries do not receive receipt of goods when they request that to importing countries. So 100% of them consider a mechanism like the MCTA very useful for their activities, and they are working with us on designing this system. We envision it as a safe web tool with different access levels that would allow countries to alert each other, to have an information repository, and to make notifications about the transfers. We are also working on optional modules for the national level so they can connect the customs and the licensing authorities and upgrade their systems from paper-based to electronic. We're currently working with 20 countries on technical reviewing committees to ensure the system is aligned to their needs. And we're hoping that next year, we're going to start developing the electronic solution pilot and then expand it through the region, and with the goal that in the future, this could be expanded outside the region, since some countries also export and import to other countries that are outside of the Americas. So we hope that this can be a seed for something much bigger that would also assist the ATT. To finalize, and I'm sorry that I rushed through some of those things, but I'm available to continue talking about it, specific questions. I think some of the opportunity areas that we see to kind of strengthen our engagement with the ATT, they really resonate what Raluca had already exposed. We think we can streamline the reports and the variables. So the report of the CTAC and the ATT, also the initial report of the ATT, that it's very similar to what we're trying to do with CIFTA. Also implementing comprehensive strategies that consider all these instruments, the regional level and the global level, that are complementary. And we think that it's quite important to continue working on those three dimensions, national, regional, and global levels, and with very specific tools that we could develop, for instance, shared databases of points of contact. We know that there is a proliferation of points of contact for each instrument, and sometimes they are not coordinated even internally on the national level, so we could cooperate to have those shared databases. We can also have the global level using the political forums of CIFTA and CTAC as a space to promote the ATT. We could think about regional points of contact to continue supporting the ATT obligation in a more direct way. And of course, promoting dialogue spaces for cross-regional cooperation, just like the one today and the tool that you're developing and launching. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and we are available for any other questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pierre, for all of this information about what OAS is doing under the various instruments. It's really quite amazing how much work is being done in both the Americas and in the ECOWAS region to really support these kinds of common standards and systems in order to better regulate the global arms trade. So thank you so much for your contribution. I want to give Dr. Sani an opportunity just to wrap up with a couple of minutes, since he is here again with us now. Dr. Sani, if you'd like to wrap up with a couple of minutes, since we had to interrupt your presentation, I'd be glad to hear that now if you're available.
Thank you, Cindy. I actually would want to thank you again for giving me this opportunity and to apologize for the hitches that we experienced. I have made the presentation is available. I'm sure the organizers will share with all the participants. So if in the event of any question, please feel free. But I would like to quickly conclude by saying the ECOWAS region also validated the ECOWAS model harmonization framework for the implementation of the ATT. And a couple of our countries are already beginning, to put in place national processes in order to enable them review their implementation frameworks. Because of the instrument of the convention, Article 24 of the convention obligates all the member states to put in place national commissions on small arms and light weapons. And with the entry into force of the ATT, we began to see, some member states creating parallel, entities, for the implementation of the ATT. So the ECOWAS's model framework is giving them the opportunity now to harmonize, so that effectively we'll have seamless implementation of the two instruments. And I'm happy, I'll need to acknowledge the support of Safer World, when we were initially conceiving the ECOWAS model law for the ATT. I must also inform this meeting that by the 31st of January 2023, we're having a regional conference that will allow our member states to begin to put in place their national control systems, for the ATT. And I will make so that we have, even if it will be virtual participation, so that you share some of the experiences. We needed to have our member states to put in place the control list in their individual member states, so that effectively the implementation of the ATT will be seamless. And lastly, the 5-year strategic plan of the implementation in the ECOWAS region. This is the ECOWAS's roadmap for sustainability and for us to actually entrench, the full implementation of the ATT. One of the critical components of the roadmap is to be able to see that our member states are having enough, opportunities, enough resources, technical and financial, to be able to implement, the key provisions of the ATT. So the ECOWAS 5-year strategic plan is going to help to support and to reinforce, in terms of sustainability in the implementation of the ATT. So I'd like to stop here and once again thank Control Arms for this opportunity. Thank you, Cindy.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Sani, and thank you to Pier, and of course to Ambassador Göbel, who has moved on to other meetings, and thank you to Raluca presenting this new publication in such great detail. I want to open it. We do have a few questions. I note the time. I think we had this time is ending at 9:15 or quarter past the hour. I think we'll stay on for about 5 more minutes. If that is all right for those of you who can join and stick around for a bit, just to answer a couple of questions and to have the opportunity for those of you who haven't yet been able to ask your questions to ask questions. I wanted to say there's a set of questions here. Well, the first question is, can we get the presentations? And the answer is yes. We will be able to circulate presentations to the group after this is over. And please also recognize that this is recorded. So if you would like to have a recording of this presentation, that will also be made available to you. The questions that I'm seeing is really, they're really kind of based on the interaction between regional actors and their member states. And the questions are, in which levels do regional actors have the most significant impact? And do regional actors face limitations from state actors to participate in these practices? And really, what seems to be the level at which the states allow more regional actor participation? And I'll put that to anyone can answer. Maybe Raluca wants to kick it off, and then we can turn it to our representatives from regional organizations who may have more in-depth responses. Thanks, Raluca.
Yes, I'd be happy to. With regards to the first question, so what levels the regional actors have the most significant impact in? I think I briefly highlighted the areas where regional actors have made significant progress. The first was legislative assistance, and we heard a little bit about that both from Pierre and from Dr. Sani. As I've mentioned, the regional organizations have played a key role in developing model law, regional roadmaps, and these have had a key role in building a foundation for states to develop their national legislation. The other area is in developing policies and procedures on gender and gender-based violence. The third one was in developing and providing capacity to states, developing guidelines and on the issue of physical security and stockpile management, PSSM. And lastly, a lot of regional organizations, both within the regional organizations, but also among themselves, have established regional working groups on either small arms and light weapons controls or firearms controls. And we see an opportunity to build on these regional working groups to also include the ATT in these discussions. In terms of limitations, I think the biggest challenge that we heard, especially from the interviews we've conducted, is in terms of capacity. Oftentimes, you know, some of the less well-known regional organizations have quite small secretariats, cover a lot of issues, and they also struggle with sustainable funding. So what if you look at our the end of our publication, you will see that there are some recommendations there for donor states in terms of supporting regional organizations, not only to engage more proactively in the ATT and the work that they carry, but also ways to showcase more often their work. Because another issue that we heard from regional organizations is that they don't have opportunities to share this tremendous work that they undertake at the regional level with stakeholders in international conferences, such as the ATT Conference of State Parties or the UN General Assembly First Committee on Disarmament and International Security. And I think for the last questions in terms of level, at which states allow more regional actors to participate. Perhaps Pierre and Dr. Sani are better placed than me to respond.
Thank you, Raluca. Thanks so much. I'll turn it to Dr. Sani and then to Pierre. Dr. Sani, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. These are pertinent questions, and honestly, for us in the ECOWAS region, we have the frontline advantage in terms of actually, putting forward regional policies, and our member states are always consistently also keying into the regional policies. For instance, we have an annual meeting of national stakeholders. Consistently, most of the issues related to the arms and ammunition, and as well as non-proliferation issues are discussed during those conferences. So by extension, we always have this support, the clear expression of political will by our member states to be able to implement, the key provisions of the ECOWAS's instrument, as well as other continental, as well as global instruments. For instance, we have also the silencing of the guns project of the African Union. We in ECOWAS region, we didn't sit back. We keyed into the initiative, and also, got our member states to also key into that specific initiative by defining, regional priorities at the regional level, and also allowing member states to define their specific national level priorities, to be able to implement the silencing of the guns project. It's equally the same with the ATT. We will not only put in place processes for them to smoothly participate in the CSPs, the various CSPs, and the ability of the region to also articulate common positions in each of the years for the CSPs, so that we can be able to speak with uniform voice, during the conference. So these are some of the nuances that we need to really, really put forward as some of the gains and the efforts at the regional level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sani. I'll turn it to Pierre. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for the questions. I think for us, the regional organizations, we see ourselves as a bridge between the global and the national level, and I think our most important contribution is precisely that we have a more direct engagement with the countries that then global organizations can have, just because of the number of memberships. So we understand more the specific characteristics of the countries and the needs. And I think the global organizations would set like the universal standards, and then we have to work with our countries, our member states, to make it more adapted to their needs on the regional levels. I think it's definitely complementary. In terms of resistance or more acceptance to the assistance, our OAS member states, they are the ones giving us the mandates, and our work is based on the mandate. So I think that's already a factor that contributes to acceptance, because we are essentially answering to their requests. But we see that it's a little bit easier to support states in terms of capacity building with training, technical and material assistance on more operational support aspects. And when we move to regional coordination mechanisms, it's much more challenging. And I don't think it's because there is a resistance from states to participate, but it requires more of them. And sometimes you have national authorities that are overloaded with other tasks and responsibilities, and they don't have the time or the resources to participate on those regional coordination mechanisms. There are always factors in terms of data privacy laws as well that would like hinder them sharing information, concerns with security of information. So for instance, in terms of everything that I exposed, the MCTA, this regional coordination mechanism, is the most challenging component that we have, and it's taking more time. And I think it requires us to adopt a different approach where it's much more important for them to participate since the beginning of the design of the intervention, and take the time to find different solutions and have more like roundtables and brainstormings where the countries can also take ownership of the systems and ensure more like long-term participation.
Thank you so much. That's great. I want to just say we're kind of past time a bit. If there are any other questions, please put them in the Q&A. But at this point, unless the panelists have questions for one another, I think I will take this opportunity to just wrap up briefly. And if there are other comments that the panelists want to add before we end, that would be fine too. So I just wanted to say that, what we've seen today and what's been outlined by all of the speakers are really a lot of opportunities for the work that is really quite deep and quite broad that is happening on the regional level for international organizations and international instruments to really take note as to what's happening on the regional level. And not only can, as Pierre mentioned, can regional organizations learn from what's happening on the international level, most certainly international instruments and organizations can learn from what's happening on the regional level. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we've undertaken this project about regional actors specific to the Arms Trade Treaty, to really understand that there is so much work happening and to really kind of build bridges, as Pierre had mentioned, and to use the support that ECOWAS has always been, has had for the ATT, and to communicate with one another and exchange ideas on how to strengthen the regulation of the global arms trade. So thanks so much. I want to open it briefly to any speakers if you have any last thoughts you'd like to add. No, I think everyone has said everything there is to say. The thing is, there's so much more that's happening. I think this is from our research that we've done, focusing on these regional organizations. We are really just scratching the surface, despite the fact that the handbook is quite comprehensive. There's more there. And so if you have questions in the future, if you have areas where you'd like more research on these issues, and ideas in terms of how regional organizations and international organizations and the ATT process in particular can really leverage the work of the regional organizations and connect better, we are all ears, and we'd be happy to engage in that conversation. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Happy holidays.